It all started innocently enough. My name is Jake Thompson, a 35-year-old software engineer from Austin, Texas. My wife Emily and I had been married for 8 years. We met in college, fell madly in love, and got married right after graduation. Our life together seemed like a fairy tale. We had 2 beautiful kids, a dog named Max, and a cozy house in the suburbs. I thought we were the perfect couple. Emily was everything I ever wanted in a partner. She was beautiful, smart, and had a sense of humor that could light up any room. We were best friends, lovers, and partners in every sense of the word, or so I thought. The first sign of trouble was subtle. It was the little things that started to change. Emily began spending more time on her phone, texting and giggling at messages that she didn't share with me. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd brush it off, saying it was just her friends from work. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we all need our space and our friends. But then, she started working late more often. There were sudden business trips and weekend conferences that she had to attend. I was supportive, trusting her completely, believing she was doing what was best for her career. One night, Emily came home particularly late, well past midnight. She claimed her meeting had run over, and then she had gone out for drinks with her colleagues to unwind. I believed her, but there was something different about her that night. She smelled of a cologne that wasn't mine, and her blouse was buttoned up wrong. Something Emily, always meticulous, would never overlook. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knot forming in my stomach. "Yeah, just tired," she replied with a weary smile, brushing past me and heading straight to the shower. I stood there for a moment, confusion and suspicion battling in my mind. Was I being paranoid? Was it just the stress of her job that was getting to her? I pushed the doubts aside, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Days turned into weeks, and the late nights became more frequent. Emily grew distant, emotionally and physically. Our sex life, once passionate and frequent, dwindled to almost nothing. Whenever I tried to initiate intimacy, she would turn away, claiming exhaustion or stress. I missed her, missed us. But every time I brought it up, she'd get defensive or angry. "Jake, I'm just tired, okay? Work is killing me." "Can't you understand that?" She'd snap, her eyes flashing with irritation. I wanted to understand. I really did. But the more I tried, the more she pushed me away. I felt like I was losing her, and I didn't know how to get her back. Then came the night that changed everything. Emily was on another business trip, and I was home alone, nursing a beer and trying to distract myself with a movie. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Jake, you deserve to know the truth." I stared at the message, my heart racing. I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "A friend. Emily has been seeing someone else. Check her email." My hands were trembling as I logged into her email account. Emily and I had always shared our passwords, a testament to the trust we once had. I felt a pang of guilt invading her privacy, but the knot in my stomach told me I needed to know. What I found shattered my world. There were hundreds of emails, messages, and photos exchanged between Emily and a man named Ryan. They had been meeting for months, under the guise of work trips and late-night meetings. The messages were explicit, detailing their encounters, their plans, and their feelings for each other. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was having an affair. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I couldn't breathe. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak washed over me in waves. I spent the rest of the night reading through the emails, every word a dagger to my heart. By morning, I was a wreck, my mind reeling from the discovery. I knew I had to confront Emily, but I didn't know how. How do you tell the person you love that you know they've betrayed you? How do you face the truth when it's tearing you apart? As I sat there, exhausted and broken, I knew that our lives would never be the same again. The fairy tale was over, and the nightmare had just begun. The morning after discovering Emily's betrayal, I felt numb. The house was silent, the kids still asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their parents' lives. I had no idea how I was going to face Emily. The thought of confronting her made my stomach churn, but I knew I couldn't live with the deceit any longer. When Emily returned from her trip later that day, I tried to act normal, but it was like walking on a tightrope. Every smile, every casual touch felt like a lie. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. So, I made a plan. "Honey, I'm taking the kids to my parents' house for the weekend," I announced that evening. "I think it'll be good for them to spend some time with Grandma and Grandpa." Emily looked at me, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossing her face. But she quickly masked it with a smile. "That sounds great, Jake. They'll love it." I packed up the kids and drove to my parents' house. On the way, I tried to keep my emotions in check, focusing on the road and my children's chatter. They were excited to see their grandparents, which made the situation a little easier. When I arrived at my parents' place, I handed the kids over, making up some excuse about needing to handle a work emergency back home. My parents, ever supportive, didn't question it. They just hugged me and told me to take care of whatever I needed to. I drove back home with a heavy heart, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. Part of me hoped that it was all a mistake, that Emily would be alone, and I'd realize I had misunderstood everything. But the other part of me, the part that had read those emails and seen those photos, knew the truth. I parked a block away from the house, not wanting to alert Emily to my presence. As I approached our home, my heart pounded in my chest. The house was dark, except for a faint glow coming from the living room window. I crept closer, careful to stay out of sight. Peeking through the window, my worst fears were confirmed. There they were, Emily and Ryan, entangled on the couch, oblivious to the world outside. My blood boiled, and I clenched my fists, trying to contain the rage that was building inside me. I couldn't stand it any longer. I stormed through the front door, the sound of it slamming shut like a thunderclap. Emily and Ryan sprang apart, their faces a mix of shock and fear. "Jake!" Emily screamed, scrambling to cover herself with a blanket. Ryan jumped up, fumbling to pull on his pants. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered, his voice trembling. But I was beyond words. All the betrayal, all the anger, it erupted in a blinding rage. I lunged at Ryan, grabbing him by the collar and yanking him towards the window. He struggled, but adrenaline had made me stronger than ever. With one powerful shove, I sent him crashing through the first-floor window. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the night as Ryan tumbled onto the lawn, groaning in pain. Emily was screaming, tears streaming down her face. "Jake, stop, please, stop." I turned to her, my chest heaving, my vision blurred with anger and hurt. "How could you, Emily? How could you do this to us? To our family?" She was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching the blanket to her chest. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for this to happen." "Never meant for this to happen?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "You've been lying to me for months, Emily!" "Do you have any idea how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt our kids?" "I was lonely," she cried. "You were always working and I felt neglected. Ryan made me feel wanted again." Her words cut deep, but they didn't excuse what she had done. I wanted to lash out, to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me. But instead, I collapsed onto the floor, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. Emily approached me cautiously, her voice soft and broken. "Jake, please. I know I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry. But we can work through this. We can fix this." I looked up at her, tears blurring my vision. "How, Emily? How do we come back from this?" She knelt beside me, reaching out to touch my hand. "We can go to counseling, talk to someone. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." I pulled my hand away, the anger flaring up again. "You should have thought about that before you started screwing him in our home." Her face crumpled and she backed away, knowing that there was nothing she could say to make this right. Not now. Maybe not ever. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the door. I needed to get out of there, to clear my head and figure out what to do next. As I stepped outside, I saw Ryan, still lying on the lawn, groaning in pain. I didn't feel sorry for him. If anything, I wanted to kick him while he was down. But I resisted the urge. He wasn't worth it. None of this was worth it. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, the events of the night replaying in my mind. The image of Emily and Ryan on the couch, the feel of Ryan's collar in my hands, the sound of glass shattering, all of it haunted me. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, after a restless night driving aimlessly and eventually crashing at a friend's place, I knew I had to face Emily again. Avoiding the inevitable wasn't going to solve anything. My friend, Mike, a no-nonsense kind of guy, offered some blunt advice over breakfast. "Jake, you need to confront her properly. Get everything out in the open. Yelling and throwing punches ain't gonna fix this. He was right. I had to go back and face the music, lay everything bare, and hear her out, even if the very thought made me want to vomit. I drove back home, each mile feeling like a mile closer to my execution. When I walked into the house, Emily was sitting on the couch, looking like she'd spent the entire night crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her hair was a mess. She looked up at me with a mixture of fear and hope. "Jake," she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Not now, Emily. We need to talk, but not like this. Let's sit down and do this properly." We moved to the dining room table, the same one where we'd shared countless family meals, celebrated birthdays, and laughed over silly jokes. Now it felt like a battleground. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Start from the beginning," I said. "I need to know everything. No more lies." Emily nodded, her hands trembling as she clasped them together on the table. "It started a few months ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I met Ryan at a work conference. At first it was just friendly. We talked about work, shared a few drinks. I didn't think anything of it." She paused, looking at me to see if I was going to explode. I kept silent, urging her to continue with a nod. "It was after a few more meetings that things changed. I was feeling neglected, Jake. You were always so busy with work, and I felt like we were drifting apart. Ryan. He paid attention to me, made me feel special. One night, after too many drinks, we slept together." She broke down, sobbing into her hands. I felt a mix of anger and pity, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. This was her mess, and she needed to own it. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling instead of turning to someone else?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared, Jake. Scared that you'd think I was being needy, that you'd brush me off. And then once it started, I didn't know how to stop. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't break it off. I felt trapped. I rubbed my temples, trying to process everything. And all those late nights, the business trips, were they all just an excuse to be with him?" "Not all of them," she said quickly. "Some were real, but yes, many were just to see him. I'm so sorry, Jake. I know I've hurt you deeply, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand that it was never about you. I still love you." Her words felt like a hollow echo of the love we once shared. I leaned back in my chair, trying to find the strength to continue. "What about the kids, Emily? Did you ever think about what this would do to them? To us?" She shook her head, sobbing harder. "I know I was selfish. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just trying to fill a void, but I see now that I was wrong. So wrong. Please, Jake, tell me how we can fix this. I'll do anything." I looked at her, this woman I had once adored, and felt a pang of sadness for what we had lost. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said quietly. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and you've shattered it. I can't just sweep this under the rug." Emily nodded, her expression one of defeat. "I understand, but can we at least try? For the kids, for us? I want to go to counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. I don't want to lose our family." Her desperation was palpable, and I could see she meant every word. But forgiveness wasn't something I could offer easily, not after everything I'd learned. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to think, to process all of this. I can't make any promises right now." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Take all the time you need, Jake. I'll be here waiting, hoping you'll find it in your heart to give us another chance." I got up from the table, feeling drained. "I need some space," I said, heading towards the door. "I'll be staying at Mike's for a while. I'll come by to see the kids, but right now, I can't be here." Emily didn't try to stop me. She just watched me leave, her eyes filled with sorrow and regret. As I drove away, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The confrontation was over, but the real battle, deciding what to do next, was just beginning. I spent the next few days at Mike's, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. Mike, being the great friend he was, gave me space when I needed it. and offered a sympathetic ear when I was ready to talk. He didn't push, and for that I was grateful. But despite his support, my mind kept circling back to one thing: revenge. The betrayal had cut me so deeply that forgiveness seemed impossible. I wanted Emily and Ryan to feel the same pain, the same gut-wrenching despair that I was feeling. One night, Mike and I were sitting on his porch, sipping beers and watching the stars. I had been quiet for most of the evening, lost in my thoughts. "What's on your mind, Jake?" Mike finally asked, breaking the silence. "I can't stop thinking about how to make them pay," I admitted, my voice cold and flat. Mike nodded, taking a swig of his beer. "Revenge can be satisfying, but it can also consume you. Are you sure that's what you want?" I stared at my bottle, the liquid inside reflecting the dim porch light. "I don't know, but right now it's the only thing that feels right." Mike didn't argue. He just listened as I laid out my plan, offering advice and caution where needed. By the time we finished our beers, I had a clear idea of what I was going to do. It wasn't going to be pretty, but I didn't care. I needed to hurt them like they had hurt me. The next day, I returned to our house while Emily was at work. I knew she would be gone all day, giving me the time I needed to execute my plan. I walked through the house, memories flooding back with every step. This was the home we had built together, the life we had shared, and now it was the stage for my revenge. I went to our bedroom and found Emily's laptop. It didn't take long to hack into her email account. Years of working in IT had given me a few useful skills. I printed out every incriminating email, every explicit photo, and every piece of evidence of her affair with Ryan. Then I made multiple copies and placed them in envelopes. Next, I made a call to Ryan's workplace. Posing as a delivery person, I arranged for a package to be dropped off at his office the following day. Inside the package were copies of the emails and photos, along with a note that read, "Enjoying your time with my wife? Hope your colleagues do too." I didn't stop there. I sent similar packages to Emily's workplace, her parents' house, and our closest friends. By the time I was done, there were at least a dozen people who would know about her infidelity. As a final touch, I created a social media post using a fake account. I uploaded the photos and emails, tagging both Emily and Ryan, and included a scathing message about their betrayal. It was a public shaming, designed to humiliate them both. I knew it was petty and vindictive, but at that moment, I didn't care. With everything set in motion, I returned to Mike's place, waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. The next morning, my phone started buzzing with notifications and calls. I ignored most of them, but one caught my eye. It was from Emily. I answered, my heart pounding. "Jake, what the hell have you done?" she screamed, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "I made sure everyone knows the truth," I replied calmly. "You wanted to play games behind my back, Emily? Now everyone gets to see who you really are. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To Ryan? My job, our friends. They're all calling, texting. You've ruined everything." "Good," I said, a twisted satisfaction filling me. "Now you know how it feels." She started to say something else, but I hung up, not interested in hearing her excuses. The next call was from Ryan. I didn't answer, letting it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to it, his voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "Jake, you need to stop this. This is going to destroy my career. Please, let's talk about this like adults." I deleted the message, not caring about his pleas. He had destroyed my marriage. I had no sympathy for him. Over the next few days, the repercussions of my actions became clear. Emily's workplace had put her on leave pending an investigation into her conduct. Ryan had been fired, his company citing a breach of their ethics policy. Friends and family bombarded us with calls and messages, expressing their shock and disappointment. Emily's parents were furious with her, and many of our mutual friends sided with me, cutting ties with her. Emily showed up at Mike's one evening, looking like a shadow of her former self. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair disheveled. She begged me to talk, to give her a chance to explain. Reluctantly, I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. We sat on Mike's porch, the silence heavy between us. "Why, Jake?" she asked finally. "Why did you have to do all of this?" "Because you needed to understand the pain you caused," I replied. "I wanted you to feel what I felt, to see the destruction you brought into our lives." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I know I hurt you, Jake, but this is cruel. I never wanted to destroy you. But you did, I said, my voice cold. You destroyed our marriage, our family. I just returned the favor. Emily sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I watched her, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. I had achieved my revenge, but at what cost? The woman I once loved was broken, and I couldn't take pleasure in that, not entirely. I don't know if we can ever come back from this, she said finally, looking up at me with pleading eyes. But I still love you, Jake. I want to make things right if you'll let me. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Revenge had been my focus, but now, faced with the wreckage of our lives, I wasn't sure what came next. The anger and betrayal still burned inside me, but so did the memories of our love, our family. As Emily waited for my response, I realized that my journey was far from over. Revenge had given me a temporary sense of justice, but it hadn't healed the wounds. The path to forgiveness, if it was even possible, was going to be long and painful, and in that moment, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to walk it. After Emily's visit, I spent the night in a haze of conflicting emotions. The revenge I had exacted had brought some satisfaction, but it hadn't filled the void left by her betrayal. Instead, it had compounded my misery with a heavy layer of guilt. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the room only amplifying my thoughts. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, examining the man I had become. Dark circles under my eyes, a scruffy beard, and a hollow look that didn't belong to the Jake I once knew. I was a man on the edge, teetering between the urge to forgive and the desire to keep punishing those who had wronged me. The kids were still with my parents, blissfully unaware of the chaos at home. I missed them terribly, their laughter, their innocence, and the simple joy they brought into my life. It wasn't fair to them, this mess we had created. I needed to see them, to feel their little arms around me, to remind myself that there was still something pure and good in my world. I drove to my parents' house that afternoon. When I arrived, the kids ran to me, their faces lighting up with pure joy. I hugged them tightly, trying to draw strength from their love. My parents watched us from the porch, concern etched on their faces. They knew something was terribly wrong, but had respected my silence. After putting the kids to bed that night, I sat down with my parents. The conversation was long overdue. They deserved to know the truth. Mom, Dad, there's something I need to tell you, I began, my voice trembling. Emily has been having an affair. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My father's expression hardened, his jaw set in a grim line. I found out a few days ago, I continued, and I didn't handle it well. I exposed her and her lover publicly, sent the evidence to her work, his work, our friends. I wanted them to feel the pain I was feeling. My father nodded slowly. Jake, I understand why you did it, but revenge can be a double-edged sword. Have you thought about what comes next? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to try and fix things for the kids' sake, but another part of me is so angry, so hurt. I don't know if I can ever forgive her. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Jake, you need to take care of yourself first. Give yourself time to heal. Whatever you decide, we'll support you. Just remember, the kids need both of you, regardless of what happens between you and Emily. Their words offered some comfort, but they didn't ease the turmoil inside me. I spent the night in my old bedroom, surrounded by memories of simpler times. The next morning, I took the kids back home, determined to face whatever came next with a clearer head. Emily was waiting for us when we arrived. She looked anxious, her eyes red from crying. The kids ran to her, and she hugged them tightly, whispering words of love and reassurance. Watching them, I felt a pang of longing for the life we once had. We put the kids to bed together, a semblance of normalcy that felt strangely comforting. Once they were asleep, we sat down in the living room, the tension between us palpable. Jake, Emily began, her voice trembling. I know you have every right to hate me. What I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand that I still love you. I want to make things right. For us, and for the kids. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Emily, I replied, my voice raw with emotion. But I do know that we need to find a way to co-parent for the kids' sake. They don't deserve to suffer because of our mistakes. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I agree. We need to put them first. But Jake, I still hope we can find a way back to each other. I'll do whatever it takes. We talked late into the night, discussing everything from counseling to how we would manage custody if it came to that. It was a painful, difficult conversation, but it was necessary. We both knew that rebuilding our relationship, if it was even possible, would take time and effort. Over the next few weeks, we started attending counseling sessions. The therapist, Dr. Harris, was a calm, reassuring presence who guided us through the minefield of our emotions. The sessions were intense, forcing us to confront the issues that had led to Emily's affair and the deep wounds it had caused. Emily opened up about her feelings of neglect and loneliness, while I admitted to my own failings. How I had thrown myself into work, often at the expense of our relationship. It was excruciatingly difficult, but it was also cathartic. Slowly, we began to understand each other again, though the road to forgiveness was still long and uncertain. In the meantime, I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I spent as much time as possible with the kids, making sure they felt loved and secure. Emily did the same, and together, we managed to create a stable environment for them, even if our own relationship was still fractured. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Emily and I sat on the porch, the cool night air a welcome respite from the heat of the day. We had just returned from another counseling session, one that had been particularly emotional. Jake, Emily said softly, breaking the silence, do you think there's a chance for us? For our marriage? I looked at her, the woman I had loved so deeply, and saw the same hope and fear reflected in her eyes. I don't know, Emily. I want to believe there is, but it's going to take time. We've both been hurt, and we need to heal. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm willing to wait, to do whatever it takes. I love you, Jake. I always have, and I always will. Her words touched something deep inside me, a flicker of the love we once shared. I love you too, Emily, but love isn't enough on its own. We need to rebuild trust, and that's going to take time and effort from both of us. We sat in silence for a while, the night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. Despite the uncertainty, there was a sense of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The journey was far from over, and the path ahead was still shrouded in darkness. But for the first time since the affair came to light, I felt a glimmer of hope, and that, I realized, was the first step toward healing. The following months were some of the most challenging and transformative of my life. The initial shock and anger had subsided, but the pain and mistrust lingered like a shadow over everything Emily and I did. Despite the complexities, we both committed to the arduous task of healing and rebuilding our relationship, with a focus on what was best for our kids. Our therapist, Dr. Harris, played a crucial role in guiding us through this process. She helped us establish clear, actionable steps to rebuild trust and improve communication. One of the first things we did was set boundaries and expectations. Emily had to be completely transparent about her whereabouts, who she was with, and what she was doing. It felt a bit like policing at first, but it was necessary for me to begin to trust her again. We also established regular check-ins with each other. These were honest, open conversations where we talked about our feelings, our fears, and our hopes. Sometimes these conversations were painful, reopening wounds that hadn't fully healed, but they were vital for our recovery. We learned to listen to each other, to validate each other's feelings, and to express our own without fear of judgment or reprisal. Emily continued to work on her issues too. She started seeing Dr. Harris for individual therapy sessions, to understand the reasons behind her actions and to ensure she never repeated those mistakes. She was determined to become a better partner and mother, and I could see the effort she was putting in. It was a small comfort, knowing that she was willing to do whatever it took to make amends. One significant step in our healing process was dealing with Ryan. I had no intention of forgiving him, but we needed to address the aftermath of my public exposure of their affair. Emily and I met with him once, in the presence of Dr. Harris, to lay down clear boundaries. Ryan apologized profusely, though his words felt empty to me. He agreed to stay out of our lives and left the company where he and Emily worked. This meeting, though difficult, was necessary to close that chapter and focus on our future. Despite all the progress, there were setbacks. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight, and there were times when doubt and suspicion crept back in. Whenever Emily was late coming home, or if she received a message she didn't immediately show me, my mind would spiral into dark places. But each time we faced it together, talking through my fears and her reassurances. Slowly, these moments of doubt became less frequent. We also took steps to reconnect as a couple. Date nights became a regular thing again, even if they were just quiet dinners at home after the kids went to bed. We spent time doing things we enjoyed together, like hiking, watching movies, or simply sitting on the porch and talking. These moments helped us remember why we fell in love in the first place. One of the hardest things to rebuild was our physical relationship. Intimacy had been shattered by Emily's affair, and the thought of being close to her brought up a mix of emotions: love, anger, betrayal, longing. We took it slow, focusing first on rebuilding emotional intimacy before trying to rekindle the physical aspect of our relationship. It wasn't easy, but over time we began to find our rhythm again. Our kids were a constant reminder of why we were fighting so hard to make this work. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, but they sensed the tension and the changes in our family dynamic. We made a concerted effort to show them that we loved them and each other, creating a stable and loving environment for them. Family outings, game nights, and just spending quality time together became our new normal. Through all this, I learned a lot about myself. I had to confront my own flaws and shortcomings, understanding how my actions and neglect had contributed to the breakdown of our marriage. This didn't excuse Emily's affair, but it did help me see the bigger picture. I realized that relationships are complex and fragile, requiring constant effort, communication, and understanding from both partners. Eventually, the wounds began to heal. They didn't disappear entirely. Scars remained, a permanent reminder of what we had been through. But those scars also represented our resilience and our commitment to each other and our family. The love we had wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was worth fighting for. 1 year after the affair had come to light, Emily and I stood in our backyard, watching our kids play. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. I looked at Emily, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. "We've come a long way," she said, squeezing my hand. "Yeah, we have," I agreed. "It's been a hell of a journey, but I'm glad we're here." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Me too, Jake. Me too." We stood there, hand in hand, watching our kids laugh and play, knowing that while our journey was far from over, we had come through the darkest times stronger and more united. The future was uncertain, but we were facing it together, with hope and determination. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. 1.5 years had passed since the affair had turned our lives upside down. Our journey had been long, painful, and filled with moments of doubt and despair. Yet here we were, stronger and more united than I ever thought possible. Emily and I had found a new rhythm in our relationship, one built on a foundation of hard-earned trust and open communication. We had learned to appreciate the small moments of joy and to support each other through the tough times. Our bond had deepened, forged in the fires of our struggles, and we emerged on the other side with a renewed sense of commitment and love. The kids were thriving, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had once threatened to tear our family apart. They were happy, healthy, and surrounded by the love of both their parents. Emily and I had made it our mission to ensure that they always felt secure and cherished, and it showed in their smiles and laughter. One of the biggest changes we made was prioritizing our family time. Weekends were sacred, dedicated to adventures and quality moments together. We explored the local parks, took trips to the zoo, and even ventured out on camping trips, something I had never done before, but quickly grew to love. There was something about being out in nature, away from the distractions of daily life, that brought us closer as a family. Professionally, both Emily and I made adjustments to our work-life balance. I cut back on my overtime and made sure to be present at home, while Emily switched to a different company, one that offered a more flexible schedule and a supportive environment. These changes allowed us to be more present for each other and our children, fostering a sense of stability and harmony. Our renewed commitment to each other extended beyond just family time. We continued to attend counseling sessions with Dr. Harris, though they became less frequent as we gained confidence in our ability to communicate and resolve conflicts on our own. The sessions had been instrumental in helping us navigate our way back to each other, and we were grateful for the guidance we received. Emily and I also made a point to nurture our individual interests and passions. I took up woodworking, transforming our garage into a workshop where I could lose myself in creating furniture and other projects. Emily rekindled her love for painting, turning one of our spare rooms into a studio filled with canvases and paints. These hobbies not only provided a creative outlet, but also gave us a sense of personal fulfillment that enriched our relationship. Our physical relationship, once a source of pain and uncertainty, blossomed anew. The intimacy we shared was no longer tainted by betrayal, but was instead a testament to our resilience and dedication to each other. We rediscovered the joy of being close, of sharing tender moments that strengthened our emotional bond. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Emily and I sat on the porch, sipping wine and reminiscing about our journey. The night was cool, the stars bright against the dark sky. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Emily asked, her voice soft and reflective. "All the time," I replied, taking her hand in mine. "I never imagined we'd make it through, but here we are." She nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of emotions. "I'm so grateful for you, Jake, for your strength, your forgiveness, your love. I know it hasn't been easy." "None of it was easy," I admitted. "But we did it together, and that's what matters." She leaned her head on my shoulder and we sat in comfortable silence, enjoying the peace that had been so hard won. In that moment, I realized just how much I had learned from this experience. I had learned the importance of communication, of never taking your partner for granted, and of always making time for the ones you love. I had learned that forgiveness is a powerful thing, not just for the person you're forgiving, but for yourself as well. Holding on to anger and resentment only poisons your own heart. Most importantly, I had learned that love, real love, is resilient. It can withstand the storms of betrayal and hurt, growing stronger in the process. Emily and I had been through hell and back, but we emerged with a deeper understanding of each other and a renewed commitment to our family. As I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of hope and excitement. We had built a new life, one filled with love, trust, and shared dreams. There would undoubtedly be challenges ahead, but I knew we could face them together. "Here's to us," I said, raising my glass in a toast. "To us," Emily echoed, clinking her glass against mine. We drank to our new life, to the journey we had undertaken, and to the future we were creating together. The road ahead was bright, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. Our story was one of redemption, of finding strength in vulnerability, and of the unbreakable bond that comes from true, unwavering love. And as we sat there, bathed in the soft glow of the porch light, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it hand in hand, ready to embrace all the possibilities of our new life.